From the moment we step into a language classroom, doesn't matter if it's physical or virtual, we're not just stepping into a space of words, grammar, or vocabulary. We're stepping into a psychological universe. A learner's mind walks in this hope, but also with fear, with memories of failure, with insecurities shaped by previous teachers, previous environments, and previous beliefs about their own identity. And language learning, perhaps more than any other field, magnifies the human psyche. Because language isn't just information, it's the self-exposed. And for so many learners, that exposure triggers anxiety. Today I want to go into one of the most invisible but powerful layers of language learning. How mindfulness, not as a trendy buzzword, but as an intentional, grounded practice, can reshape the emotional landscape of learners who struggle with anxiety, fear of speaking, fear of judgment, and fear of not being good enough. And I want to take you deep into the research, but also into the stories behind the research. I want to walk you through the human experience behind the pedagogy. Because if there's one thing language educators often forget, it's that anxiety is not an academic issue. It's a biological one. It's emotional. It's chemical. It's physical. And it lives in the breath, the heartbeat, the shoulders, the tone of voice. And for many learners, it decides the outcome of the entire journey before grammar ever gets a chance to help or hurt. And as I always tell you, sit down comfortably, get yourself a coffee, and let's get started. Woo!
Let's go!
So, I want you to imagine a student. Picture them vividly for a moment. Maybe it's one of your students, maybe it's you, maybe it's someone you taught 10 years ago and never forgot. They're sitting in a classroom, knowing the answer in their mind, rehearsing the words in silence. But the moment the teacher calls their name, the mind collapses. Right? The breath tightens. Thoughts fragment, vocabulary disappear, they forget tenses they have mastered, they forget how to say even the simplest words. And the teacher, unaware of the internal hurricane, interprets the silence as lack of preparation. Yet that silence is not a lack of knowledge. It's a symptom of anxiety. This is where mindfulness becomes not a luxury, but a tool of liberation. Over the last decade, a huge body of research in cognitive psychology and neuroeducation has shown a direct relationship between anxiety and working memory. When anxiety spikes, working memory performance drops sharply. And working memory, which is your temporary storage system for words, grammar, structure, and syntactic planning, is the engine of speaking. All right? When anxiety rises, language processing collapses. We see it in TOEFL candidates who know how to structure a response but freeze the moment the timer begins. And I feel it because I have right now a student who's actually trying to get to a certain score. He wants to reach 110. And he got this thing as well. So we see it also in young children who suddenly forget vocabulary during a performance, even though they practice flawlessly at home. We see it in adults, as I just told you, who can communicate perfectly one-on-one, but shut down in group situations. So, mindfulness. Well, at its core is the training of attention. It teaches the learner to return to the present moment without judgment. It teaches the learner to interrupt the spiraling narrative of I will fail, I will sound stupid, or they speak better than me, and some other one says they will laugh, or my accent is embarrassing, my grammar is terrible, I don't belong here. And this just to name a few. And when a learner quiets that narrative, even for a few seconds, something extraordinary happens. The cognitive load decreases. Working memory expands. The learner can retrieve vocabulary more easily. They can process grammar more smoothly. They breathe differently, sit differently, speak differently. Their identity shifts slightly. Enough to create a crack through which confidence can seep in. Anxiety reduction is not about eliminating fear, it's about expanding the space around it. And one of the most beautiful insights from mindfulness research is that you don't need to become a monk to benefit from it. Even brief, consistent practices, 2 minutes before class, a moment of breath awareness before speaking, a grounding exercise before a test, can dramatically change performance. And as a matter of fact, a well-known 2013 study by Sean Baylock, author of Choke, showed that students who spend a few minutes writing about their anxiety before a high-pressure exam perform significantly better than those who didn't. And here's the question. Why is that? Well, because naming the emotion reduces its power. Externalizing the fear deactivates its grip on working memory. And mindfulness achieves the same outcome, but through body awareness and self-regulation. Now, imagine starting a class not with grammar, warm-ups, but with a grounding moment. Not meditation, not anything complicated, just a simple check-in. Notice your breath, notice how your body feels, or any tension. We're here to learn, not to be perfect. Students don't need incense, mats, or music. They just need permission to pause. Because language learning is fast-paced by nature, and anxiety thrives in speed. Mindfulness slows down the internal tempo, enough for cognition to catch up. And I remember a student I taught years ago. Brilliant, hardworking, and determined. But every time speaking practice began, she would blush, freeze, and whisper so quietly that no one could hear. She understood everything. She wrote beautifully. But speaking? She avoided it like the plague. After weeks of trying the traditional encouraging methods, I switched strategies. I taught her a grounding technique used by actors before walking on stage. Feel your feet on the floor. Inhale slowly. Exhale twice as long. Within a month, her voice strengthened. Within 3 months, she was volunteering answers. Within 6, she was assisting classmates during speaking activities. She didn't gain confidence because she magically acquired more vocabulary. She gained confidence because she learned to regulate her emotional state. So emotional safety is the foundation of communicative courage. Now, let's talk about the connection between mindfulness and pronunciation. Most people don't realize that pronunciation is heavily influenced by physical tension. Jaw tension, tongue tension, shoulder tension. These all shape sound production. Learners with high anxiety often struggle to articulate clearly, not because they lack phonetic knowledge, but because their muscles are physically constricted. Relaxation is not a bonus. It's a prerequisite for articulation. Mindfulness techniques indirectly transform pronunciation by reducing that muscular tension. And then there's the fascinating relationship between mindfulness and memory retention. When learners are calm, they encode information more deeply. When they are anxious, the brain goes into survival mode. You can't store new vocabulary if your brain thinks you're in danger. And yes, it's true. Speaking in front of people does trigger the same circuits the brain uses when facing threat. And that's why mindfulness, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system, creates the neurobiological conditions for learning to happen. Now, let's move into the realm of self-talk, one of the most underrated aspects of mindfulness in language learning. Self-talk is the internal voice narrating the learner's experience. In anxious learners, self-talk is often punishing, catastrophic, and deeply critical. And immediately start those thoughts like, I said that wrong. Oh, my grammar is trash, right? They understood me, but I sounded stupid. Some of them actually have this. I'll never be fluent. That's one of them. Typical. What? Mindfulness teaches learners to observe that voice without believing it. It allows them to create distance between thought and identity. Instead of, I'm bad at speaking, the learners learn to say, I'm experiencing difficulty speaking today. That small shift from permanence to temporariness changes motivation, persistence, and self-worth. In multilingual context, this becomes even more crucial. Think about learners living abroad or working in environments where their target language is tied to social survival. Their anxiety is double because language becomes directly linked to belonging, respect, opportunity, safety. Mindfulness becomes not just a pedagogical strategy, but a tool of emotional resilience. It helps learners navigate spaces where they feel inferior or invisible because of their language level. And let's be honest, any educational system unintentionally fuel anxiety. For sure, most of you agree on this one. Time tests, forced participation, public correction, competitive classrooms, grades tied to oral performance, teachers who interrupt mid-sentence, peers who mock accents, institutional pressures to reach benchmarks that don't reflect real-life language learning. In all of this, mindfulness becomes a form of resistance, a way for learners to reclaim their emotional agency in systems that often condition them to feel inadequate. Mindfulness is not the cure for everything. That's a fact. But it's the beginning of many cures. Now, educators who integrate mindfulness into language instruction are not making the class less academic. They're making it more human, more effective, aligned with how the brain learns best. I've seen adults cry after mindfulness activity because it was the first moment they felt safe in a language environment. I've seen shy teenagers suddenly participate more. Young children calm down before circle time simply by practicing a hand on their belly. I've seen TOEFL candidates increase their speaking scores after learning how to breathe through the fear. What mindfulness really achieves is the removal of internal noise. And in the absence of noise, learners finally begin to hear themselves. And I want to close with this thought. Okay? Language learning is emotional courage disguised as academics. Every time a learner speaks, they are risking embarrassment, failure, and misunderstanding. But every time they speak, they're also claiming identity, belonging, and voice. And mindfulness helps them recognize that the anxiety they feel is not a barrier. It is a sign that what they're doing matters. So today, if you're a learner, take a breath. You're not expected to be perfect. You're expected to try. And if you're a teacher, dear colleague, create space. Give silence, give compassion, presence. These small moments of mindfulness might be the very reason of a learner, or the reason a learner gains the courage to speak when they once stayed silent. Until next time, keep breathing through the fear and keep learning with intention.